Hello, data leaders. This is Les Muller, and this is the Data Leaders Podcast. I am your host. And today on the show, I have Barry Green. Barry is currently the Chief Data Officer at the Bank of Ireland, and he will be speaking at our Transformation Roundtable in May here in London. Barry, welcome on the show.
Thanks a lot.
It's great to have you as a guest. And you will be speaking on a very interesting and very high priority topic for our audience members, which is taking ownership of data. And during today's episode, we will just, unpack that a little bit more so they get to know you. But before we jump in, can you just give us a brief introduction on your journey of becoming a data leader?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'm going to be controversial. I don't think about myself as a data leader. I think of myself as a business leader. Data is an important part of driving business value. And so I kind of see myself more as a business leader than a data leader, right? And as you'll see in my topic, I data and process for me are not mutually exclusive. So it's not just about data. It's a bit of controversy right at the bat there. Now, my career has spanned 30 years. I've had mainly in financial services, bit of consulting, but effectively how I've got to where I've got to is I've always solved problems using process and data. And I just think now it's becoming more and more relevant and topical. I became a CDO at HSBC and helped set up the CDO organization. And that was kind of 5 years ago. So I've kind of grown from there. I'm in my second CDO role. But I actually think there is a need for leadership in the business around data. And that's why I think the CDO is critical.
No, absolutely. And yeah, actually, most of our members here at Data Leaders are working at the intersection of business and technology. So, actually gaining best practice in the area is becoming more and more important. And I think this is why your particular topic also gained a lot of traction, taking ownership of data. I know it can be very challenging in large organizations. I mean, why did you choose this particular topic?
So for me, the way I describe as a chief data officer is you're a conduit for change. So you're bringing the organization together and you're helping them understand what's happening. What I personally feel is that the business has abdicated responsibility for data, and ownership is where the rubber hits the road. So, you go to a lot of conferences and people are talking about theoretical stuff and implementing all these theoretical constructs, which are really complicated and no one understands except for the kind of cone heads. So for me, ownership is where the rubber really hits the road and where it affects everyone in the business. And even though it's probably something that people don't want, I think actually from what I'm seeing, if you describe it in a way that they understand, people are actually gagging for ownership because they can see that a lot of the problems that have been caused is because there's no real clear defined boundaries or people don't understand how things flow in an organization. For me, it's the critical part of data at the moment is getting that ownership in place and making it work.
Fantastic. And I think you made a really good point about, on different conferences and summits, there are a lot of theories being discussed, but people are really looking for, practical tools and, best practice that actually works in the real world. I mean, that's why we work with this particular format. So that's why we keep these sessions very interactive. And also, I think people who attend really want some interactive engagement with both their peers and also the speakers as well. I mean, during your career, what kind of real-life experiences have you had, in this particular subject that you aim to build the content around?
You mean around ownership?
Yes. So taking ownership of it in a large organization.
So I've never seen it, and so I had an opportunity where I had 8 months, and I wasn't on a beach, but I had 8 months to sit back and think about what do I want to be? I want to be a CDO. Let's take some time to take all the experience I've got and put it into something to kind of a toolkit and think about how that toolkit will work in an organization. And that's when it wasn't the case. It's a case that I've never seen ownership really work properly anywhere, and I haven't heard people talking about it like it's working very well in places. So I took all of that and I created a framework, and I'm now in the process of implementing that framework. And, you know, what I would say is that with any practical implication, you need a foundation and you need a sort of a structure, and then it's probably 80% correct. And then whatever the organization is, you need to iterate it, because there'll be cultural differences, there'll be political differences. There's things you need to work around. So it's not like there's one answer for ownership. I think there's a pretty strong argument for the way I'm doing it, but it needs to be iterated depending on the organization and the context. So hopefully that's answered your question.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, evidently you say that your framework seems to answer the questions, but you must have encountered some you know, challenges as well. So during your journey and during that implementation phase, what were your main obstacles that you had to overcome, and you know, what were those difficulties that framework helped you to overcome?
So part of it's around language. So we looked at having sort of three types of ownership. So end-to-end process ownership, what we're now calling discrete ownership, and then data. And what we were starting off saying, we have to map the end-to-end and blah, blah, blah. And it all made sense conceptually, right? And then when we started having debates around what does end-to-end ownership mean? And so what we're doing now is we're looking at mapping discrete process only. And so when I say data and process are not mutually exclusive, you can textualize critical data through process. So, you know, the example I give is first name and last name in the account opening process are critical. First name and last name may appear on a file that goes to risk to create the risk-weighted assets, you know, for the mortgage portfolio or the loan portfolio, whatever it is. But first name and last name aren't critical, right? Data is contextually relevant, contextually critical. End-to-end process is a bit like that. So when we were having the debates around, you know, end-to-end process for risk-weighted assets, you know, the person in risk rightly said, but hey, wait a second, it starts at my team and ends at my team. I'm going, okay, yes, I get that. That's discrete. That's your discrete process, and we have to map that, right? But the regulator will come in and say, wait a second, buddy, I want to see that metric on the court risk report where it ends up, and I want to see the data that's flowing into that and how that gets into the systems. Now that's a contextually relevant end-to-end process for risk-weighted assets that the regulators defined. So what we've said is we've kind of changed the way we communicate it. So we start with discrete and we add discrete processes as we need to get to a relevant end-to-end contextualized process. And so it becomes easier to sell, because actually you're going into a room and you're saying, so you come into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and you leave at 5 o'clock and you do this stuff. And that stuff is these steps as we've defined in the process. Do you agree? Yes. Do you own it? Yes. And what we're doing is we're saying you own it, you're responsible for that process on a 100% committed basis. And they can't argue with it, right? No one argues with the logic. And so they go, okay, that makes sense. And by taking away building end to end, we've taken down some of the barriers. So again, it's, you know, what's right for the organization. It could be as simple as language, calling it different things so that it gets understood by the right people. So, you know, it's just I could consider myself to be a data pragmatist. That, you know, there is no right way, but I think, you know, you need to be able to communicate it simply, and it needs to be done practically. There's too much in the data space is talk around doing things, you know, that if you implemented, you'd need millions and millions of dollars and hundreds of people, and most companies don't have that. Hopefully that's explained it.
Absolutely, and definitely, you know, we hear the same from, you know, everyone who's successful in data, that being pragmatic really helps, and, you know, really building these systems and frameworks that help you and guide you through these processes. And can you just give us a bit of an insight into what your session will cover? So everyone in the room will be a senior practitioner working in data at major organizations, and they are really looking for practical insights, and they want to discuss this between themselves and really relate to each other's challenges as well, so they can cross-reference it and benchmark with each other too. And the session itself will be broken down into 3 parts. First, you will have the opportunity to give that presentation, as kind of a case study. And then you can facilitate a group discussion. And then each table will present their solutions to the entire group. So you can outline the final conclusions. So what will your session cover? What will be the main focus areas and the main takeaways?
So one's around communications and change. So I think data's the key role of a chief data officer is communication and change. So it'll be a little bit about that. It'll be about the kind of 6 core components of the data management framework that we've put in place. Then we'll talk about the specifics of ownership in more detail around how that works. And again, it's only a 5-minute exercise. It's not complicated. And talk about potentially some of the things that we've had to change and had to iterate and practically implementing it. And effectively, that's probably it. So there's the communications change, there's the framework in its entirety, and then there's pulling out ownership. So those would be the 3 critical things that would come out of the presentation.
Sounds interesting. And what do you think that these people will be able to do when they go back to their organizations based on the learnings? How can they improve their current processes?
Well, I think the framework will give them some ideas in terms of how they may be able to implement the framework in their own organization. They may look at it and say, well, I can take that piece and add it to what I'm already doing. They may say, look, it's rubbish, I'm not going to use it. I doubt it, but they could do that too. But the thing is, it'll give them something to measure against, or at least to challenge their own thinking, because it may not work in some places. That's fine. But at least, the reason I like talking at conferences and talking to people doing this is because, if you can't challenge your own ideas, then you're not in a very good space. So I think, it's all about being able to challenge your own ideas. If you take away one thing, then that's useful, because, it's not, I'm not going to solve the world's problems with my presentation. And hopefully I'm going to come away with something that I can use as well. So, learning is a two-way thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's why your topic and also the structure that you outlined, I think it fits our format particularly well. And I agree 100%. Learning is always a two-way street. And given that we still have a bit of time, I would like to, ask you about some future trends as well. So as CDO, you must have your, teeth sunk into some interesting new technologies and innovations as well. Are there any particular trends or technologies that you are particularly excited about today?
So for me, AI and machine learning are really exciting. I think it's a bit like I don't like the term big data, but there's a lot of noise in the market around all these things. But I think they at the heart of what we're looking at, very exciting. I think the thing that's going to really add value is quantum computing power as well. So I think that the ability to be able to do things 100 times or 1,000,000 times faster than we do today it's just super exciting, really exciting. But again, I think that there's a lot of talk, a lot of noise. I'm not sure it's going to be tomorrow that all this stuff's going to come to fruition, but we need to start thinking about it and managing it so that we get the value out of it.
Absolutely. I actually did a podcast interview with Eddie Short. Eddie is speaking at our roundtable in March. Eddie is the managing director of data and analytics at Aon, and he will actually talk about leveraging machine learning to improve data quality and customer experience. The companies are actually doing it now. They already started. I mean, what are your plans in terms of leveraging it? I know that it's coming along quite slowly, the actual practical implementation, especially in highly regulated industries like banking. But do you have any particular plans outlined in terms of making it happen and bringing it into reality?
Yeah, but for me, the reason. I mean, I'm very passionate about AI, machine learning, quantum computing. What I think is missing at the moment is the ethics around AI, and how do we stop people programming algorithms with bias so that what we're getting out is perhaps not what we really wanted to get out at the start. So I think there's a bit of thinking that's needed around the governance and I don't like the word, around the management of this. So how do we create rules and ethics so that we know we're getting the right thing, and and especially with with AI. So machine learning, not so much. That's but we have to start thinking about ethics and have to start building some rules as a data community around making sure that we're benefiting people, not benefiting people. So it's a little bit philosophical as opposed to pragmatic, but I think we do have to start thinking about what are we doing as a data community to put in place controls and thinking around ethics, etc., and stopping bias. So it's not that I know it's not happening. I just think that we're kind of powering on without necessarily thinking about it correctly in terms of how we use it or make sure that we're getting the right result. Hopefully that wasn't too much waffle.
No, not at all. And it is a very interesting field. And I agree with you. It's, it's kind of bordering on philosophical as well, because these are all new challenges, not just for data professionals, but also I think for, humanity as a whole. I just recently watched a very interesting TED Talk by Sam Harris on specifically this topic. I'm not sure if you saw it. It kind of went viral.
No, but I'll be interested if you can send me the details. I'll be interested. It's a fascinating subject. Yeah, absolutely.
I will send it to you after the conversation. I will also put it in the show notes. So Sam is a prominent a philosopher and a contemporary thinker, and he is in touch with people like Elon Musk, for example. And in his TED Talk, he really went in depth into the new challenges that AI poses from a philosophical and ethical perspective. So we'll make sure to send it over to you. And this will be a topic, so machine learning and AI, it will be one of the most important topics I think that we will discuss in May as well as a group, from more like a data and organizational perspective. So I expect some exciting conversations to emerge. And Barry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a very interesting conversation. And I would like to close with one final question. I think a lot of our audience members, especially those who are just starting out in their data journeys, would love to hear your thoughts and your 2 cents on this. What would you advise for new and aspiring data professionals who want to become successful in the field?
Okay, so be business driven, but be able to challenge technology. Right, so your focus needs to be driving business value, regulatory commitments, employee engagement, and driving P&L, right? But you have, so you can do all that and fail because you can't challenge technology. So for all the technology people there, they're probably going to kick me when we get there in May. But you have to be able to challenge what technology tell you and make sure that they're doing the right thing as well. So it's a difficult role. You've got to be able to communicate with the business, and you've got to be able to communicate and challenge technology. So you've got to be broad in your abilities. You can't just be focused on analytics and data. You've got to be able to have a broad understanding and be able to communicate with all of those parties.
Absolutely. It is a challenging field, but is it worthwhile, you think?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting, right? It's an interesting, never dull. I kind of describe it as being a bit bipolar, right? So you have days when you're yay, and then you have days when you feel like all you've been is kicked all day, all week. So it's exciting, it's challenging, like, with the AI and the machine learning, all that stuff. It's all really exciting, but there's also some dull stuff. But you have to be broad and be able to communicate across the piece.
Absolutely, and it may be one of the reasons why it's such a rewarding profession is because of this roller coaster, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, so Barry, thank you so much for the interesting conversation. For those audience members who would like to meet Barry, he will be speaking in May on our Transformation Roundtable. More details will be available on our website, dataleaders.net. And I hope to see you there, Barry, in person.
Okay, great. Be nice to meet you. Cheers.
Cheers. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.